Alrighty, hello. So, I'm going to talk about some class comparisons in this series of videos, basically describing all the classes in ROTMG and their pros and their cons and when to use which. I'm starting off with the Necro because the Necro is my personal favorite, and I have a 6/8 Necro handy. Yeah, and I've also drunk a monopod, but I'm gonna do that mono life maxing a little later when I have a more stable internet connection. Alright, so starting off here. The Necromancer is a very interesting class. It's first and foremost, it is a healer, and a lot of people don't play it as a healer. They play it as a damager, a DPS class. It's got good DPS, no doubt, but it's a healer. Okay, which makes it actually pretty much the tankiest robe class, because if you just put your mouse on top of yourself, you can actually rush fairly decently. If you just give yourself an EP, put your mouse on top of you, and rush, you can actually, especially once you're 8/8, you can actually rush some of the Godlands dungeons even. So they like when it comes to the robe classes, they're pretty surely the best rushers because they can heal for as much as they want. Unless maybe you could count the priest if they have the Tome of Holy Protection, but that's rare and hard to get and expensive, so it's unlikely that you'll usually have that. One of the things I've mentioned before is the Necromancer is really probably the best farmer of the Godlands in the game. That is, if you have a weak pet. If you have a very good heal pet, you could easily argue that maybe Wizard is better, but the key is that staff classes, because of their range and DPS combo, they're excellent at killing gods, and because you're the Necro and you're your heal, the walls of gods don't scare you as much, and you don't need to keep nexusing for health or teleporting away, so you can stay fighting longer. Of course, if you have a pet that heals for like 50 health every few seconds, it really kind of negates that. But it takes a long time to get that kind of pet, and even with that kind of pet, it's still nice to be able to have a quick heal handy instead of having to suddenly dodge and be very careful until your pet will heal you. So I still think that the Necromancer got a little nerfed by the pets, but it's still a great class for farming Godlands, okay? Because it does have decent DPS, and the thing is, it's really easy to use, okay? Like, it's kind of a nubby character, because noobs can use it really effectively and easily, because it's special, affects everything in the range, it's centered on your cursor, there's nothing special, you'll be using your special on the same things you're fighting, whereas like a trickster, you have to suddenly move your cursor away to teleport, and then bring it back to the enemies, which can be a very far distance, which takes more skill, so it's not as noob friendly. The other good thing about the Necromancer is that aside from just soloing the Godlands, they can also solo all the dungeons in the Godlands without too much of an issue. Not as fast as some other classes, but they can still do it, which is a huge benefit. Because it allows you to get more pots faster. And it's also, I mean, another good thing about it is they're actually very effective fresh, as in before drinking any pots, assuming you get a somewhat decent roll. Just because they are such a safe class, because you get to stay at a great distance, so you're not at risk of any shotguns, and you have a heal, so if you do accidentally tank a couple hits, you can be safe with it. So that's another reason why they're a new class. I mean, that's not to say that they're not much better maxed than fresh. I mean, a max Necro can farm Godlands 10 times faster than a fresh one, but there's still, the key is that they're still good fresh, okay? Now there are of course downsides, just like with every class there's pros and cons. I've kind of gone through the pros, and now I gotta get to the cons, because you can't just ignore the cons. So the first con I would say is that the tombs and the trenches are kinda tough on a Necro, because they don't have the same DPS as the Wizard, and they don't have the defense of a different class, and there's not always so many things to heal in there, especially during the boss fights. Now, it's rare that you can be in a trench or tomb alone, but or with few people, but if you are, you could be in trouble, especially in the tomb, most people really don't want anyone with a staff shooting, especially not anyone with, like, who's going to get too close and accidentally shoot something behind. Because you see how you have two shots, and one of them can keep going when the other one hits, and in the tomb, you don't want to awaken all the bosses, usually, unless it's a public tomb, and you awaken them by hitting them just once. So that's why people tend to not like people with cosmics when they're in small tombs, just because it is dangerous. Yeah. Moving on. The Necro sucks balls at 01 and 02. Well, okay, it's not great at 01, you can still get soulbound, but at Oryx 2, you're somewhat very screwed. You don't have any special that'll let you get it well. Now you can just see that I'm lagging a lot more than I usually do. Something's wrong with my internet, which is why I'm actually been a little slower on the video output, but I'll try to find times when I can actually get decent internet, and I'll show you some stuff then. Interestingly enough, a lot of people get confused by the skull system. It's probably the one of the weirdest item systems. I mean, with the Trickster, everyone uses the T0 staff unless they want the ghostly prism. Sorry, not staff, prism. Oh, yeah, okay. Anyways, everyone uses T1 or T0, I forget which one it is, prism, just because they don't really care about how long. They don't usually care for the decoy too much, unless they're really, really good or really, really noob and don't realize that it's not easy to use effectively. And so it's really clear cut. With the Necromancer, I see a lot of people going and putting on the best skull they can find, and that's not right, because your ability is a heal, and the T4 skull has good enough range, so that's the range in which it will heal you. That's plenty of space. It can hit tons of enemies and get you. I've gotten easily like 1,000 heal off of the T4 skull or the T3 skull, and it gives you more uses to be putting on the noob skull. Okay, you can use it like a bunch of times, and skulls are expensive, so like mana wise as well as price wise. So you really do want to stick with the T3 and 4 until you have at least max whiz and have drunk a bit of mana as well. Which is why I only recently decided to put on my T6 skull, just because T6 is of course better for if there's not a lot of enemies around, like in sparsely populated Godlands areas, or if the enemy has high defense. The way the skull works is it basically does damage as if it was a bunch of little tiny bullets, but like only one bullet may hit each enemy. So defense is calculated, and then whatever damage is done, some of it's returned back to your health, and that's it. There's no like armor break, there's no multiple damage. There's nothing. There's no like if it's closer to the center, it does more damage, and nothing like that. At least not right now. And that's really all there is to the Necromancer, which is one of the things that makes them easy. There's no special funny tactics. There's nothing too powerful. Although I'd like to take this opportunity to give you a little rundown of optimal controls, especially during this epic load screen. Another display of why my videos have been coming a little slower. And that is your control setup. I've seen a lot of noobs. Like the easiest way to tell a noob is by their control and playstyle. So obviously WASD for movement, unless you happen to. I'll start with right-handed controls. If you're left-handed and like the arrow keys better, I have a set of controls for that too, but they're not as user-friendly. So anyways, WASD or equivalent for movement, then E or equivalent for rotate right, Q for rotate left. I like spacebar for ability. Some people like different keys. You can set it to right-click. You just need to remap that, and if you want, I can post a tutorial on how to do that. In fact, you can map any button on any device to any keyboard thing pretty easily. I would definitely say Nexus should be R or equivalent, because Nexus is a very important key, and if you have Nexus as insert, I'm afraid you are a noob. As much as you'd like to not admit it to yourself and sit in denial, you're still a noob. As long as your Nexus key is insert. Unless, of course, you use like a hacked client or auto Nexus, in which case you're still a scrub at least. So, yeah, that's that. I like tab for center versus off center. And I like shift. Wait, no, shift is for drinking pause. What do I like other than that? I think that's it. Tab for, and control for back to default angle, which should be 0, so you can align yourself to grids more easily. Final little thing is staffs. You see I have an EP. These are only really good at Penteract, or anything that doesn't actually shoot. So Penteract and Mad Scientist, it's good at because you can sit on top of them without taking damage. It's also good for leveling noobs. Like going through the noob lands, you can get a lot of fame. Well, relatively speaking, for noobs, relatively safely. So it's good for leveling noobs as well. Other than that, C-hole all the way. Alright, thank you.